Hi, Andy Nilsson. Today I want to talk about choosing a legally strong trademark. What is the best trademark for you? Now, a lot of things could go into that equation, but I do at least want to give you some ideas about what the elements are of a stronger trademark in terms of legal protection. It may not serve your needs necessarily, a lot of other sorts of needs, but legally speaking, there are some trademarks that tend to be more defensible than others. So I'll be real quick. 4 categories. First are generic terms. Now, generic terms really aren't trademarks because they don't serve a trademark function. They don't point to a single source of goods or services or distinguish your goods or services from that of a competitor's. And generic terms are easy. Beer to sell beer, that sort of thing. I mean, generic terms just cannot be trademarks. Now, let's move a little bit over to the right here. We get to what are called descriptive trademarks. These are sorts of trademarks that describe an ingredient or a purpose or a quality of the goods or services. So American Airlines, that's a geographic description, right? Speedy auto glass or something along those lines, right? That's a kind of a laudatory term that tells you something about the product or service. So those kinds of trademarks can effectively communicate some information to a consumer, your customer, but at the same time, they're just typically not as legally protectable because they employ words or elements, because it could be logos as well, elements that sometimes are necessary or just don't have that uniqueness, that distinctiveness that a consumer would recognize as being a trademark as opposed to just something that describes services or goods. So they can be strong, but they're not the strongest sort of trademark. Next to that are what we call suggestive trademarks. Suggestive trademarks don't describe an ingredient, quality, purpose, but they more loosely suggest it. So a couple examples, Airbus. Airbus for airline services doesn't describe what it is, but it kind of suggests kind of something about the product or service. Or Greyhound. Greyhound suggests something about the transportation service, the bus service, but it doesn't describe it. It may just suggest that it's sleek, quick, that sort of thing. So a little bit different, but very distinct and very legally protectable from the get-go. And then finally, move a little bit more to the right. Some of the strongest trademarks, again, they may not be the thing that you want, may not be the best for what you're trying to communicate or present to represent your brand, but the strongest legally tend to be what are called either fanciful trademarks or arbitrary. Arbitrary trademarks, real words, symbols that we see, but they're applied in a very arbitrary fashion that make them very distinct and distinctive when they're representing goods or services. Apple. Okay, if you're selling apples, that's generic. Apple, real word, consumer electronics, arbitrary use, very legally distinctive and very protectable. Same thing with Apple's logo. It's a depiction of an apple, right? If you use that on the box of apples, it would just be generic. Maybe descriptive, but probably generic. But when you use it with consumer electronics, arbitrary, very protectable because it's legally distinctive. Similar to those arbitrary marks would be what we call fanciful marks. Just made up things, right? Verizon, Google, Kodak, Polaroid, and the list goes on and on and on. Those made up terms, they have no significance in the English language or any other language whatsoever other than being used as a trademark. So that's where they find their utility, their distinctiveness. That's why they are very legally protectable because you don't know them, you don't associate them with anything else. I mean, you hear those words that I just spoke? You think of we had one source of goods or services. Those are the most legally protectable trademarks out there. Again, they may not be for you. You may not want a coined, made-up word because you might say, look, I want to communicate something about my product or service in my trademark. It's very important to me. So you might have a descriptive or a suggestive trademark. That's possible. It just may serve your needs. But when it comes to legal protection, exclusiveness, it may be a little bit weaker as opposed to the other marks that don't communicate anything about your products or services, but they're memorable, right? Anyway, that's it. If you have any questions about this video, shoot me a message, drop a comment, and if somebody you think would benefit from viewing this video, please feel free to share it. Until next time, have a good one. Bye-bye.